In the last two council committee meetings, clarification of code regarding code enforcement's authority to enter onto private property was provided by Council President Graham and Service Director Ogden. Unfortunately, the information offered was not complete, but what was shared only seemed to bolster this administration's aims, which I charge is to exert aesthetic change in Whitehall outside of their constitutional authority to do so. I take your attention then to the code which I provided you. President Graham took it to the third comma where it talks about authorization, where it seems to back up the administration's position that they have the right to step onto private property. Then, using only that portion of the code, he provided his interpretation on its meaning, which included code enforcement's ability, once on property, to then use that vantage point to spy over onto other citizens' property to gain evidence of even more infractions. He then sped through the rest and clarified it all for us by saying, "There you go then." Mr. Ogden merely said, "We have the right to step onto property unless they say no." The minimalism of Mr. Ogden's statement doesn't allude to several other components of the code which make up the whole truth, one of which is the word provided. It says they're authorized entry provided they knock on the door to receive permission to enter the property, and if no one is home, then make a reasonable effort to contact the owner-occupant, meaning telephone and mail. If they still do not receive permission, then they must seek remedies for stepping onto property as provided by law. Everywhere I look for what that law is, it always comes back to a warrant. And if comprehension and contemplation were actually included in the reading of this entry, you would have understood that their authority is impotent in light of the higher authority of the citizens and the competent judgment of the judicial branch to issue a warrant with probable cause. As an example, I offer you my situation in 2008 where code enforcement came up 54 feet onto my property that was marked, even then, by a no trespassing sign, compiling evidence of cars owned by my brother having expired tags, which they then used as evidence to issue a warning, and using the power of the law at their command, subsequently compel me into court with a summons. I never received any notice or communication from them asking permission to step onto my property, nor was any warrant issued, despite having information on where I lived. Despite their non-attempt, the sign, clearly visible to this day, served as my wishes in my stead, that which they ignored. In other words, per the law of the holy codes, they broke it in order to enforce expired tags on a car. If the code is the law and they do not follow the law, then they have broken the law. If this administration says they can step onto private property without permission or a warrant signed by a judge, aka due process, then I say, Madam Mayor and City Attorney Shannon, provide us all with a copy of that law. And as a postscript, they never did.